Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about Saddleback Park. Do you remember Saddleback Park? It was over off of Chapman Avenue East in the 55 freeway, and it was a really great motorcycle park. Many of you got your start there racing a motocross and other venues, Speedway, TT, trials, everything over at Saddleback Park. And it was a great place. It was in the city of Orange. That was my birthplace, is Orange. And it was right up the Chapman Avenue East, going up the hills. If you remember that place, it was great. It's probably one of the greatest motocross, motorcycle parks ever. Everybody could go to Saddleback from the very beginning rider, somebody who's just starting their track of motorcycles, to the most experienced racer. They all enjoyed Saddleback. It was really a very fun track. And it's too bad we don't have those tracks anymore because those tracks really groomed a lot of great racers and they really helped a lot of people become good riders. And it's just a lot of fun. A lot of weekend warriors went there with their kids and they unloaded the motorcycles and they just had a great family activity also. So that was really cool. The Saddleback Park was just fantastic. And they had some great motocross races there back in the day. I used to go up there on my bicycle. I had a speedway bicycle, like a little Stingray bike, and I used to ride around during the GP races with Roger DeCoster. I used to take a lot of pictures of Roger DeCoster and Brad Lackey, all these great Joel Robert and all these guys from Europe. It was just fantastic. And Larry Huffman would be announcing those races. And we had Larry on the show and talking about it. And it was just really a fantastic time in motorcycle history. And Saddleback was a big park. They had lots of places to ride. They had that mini motorcycle track where all the riders rode the minis. And that's where I got my start. I have a trophy up there in the trophy area from Saddleback Park riding the minis. And next to the mini track, they had a speedway track and got to watch Danny Becker. And they used to have a girl rider, I forgot her name, but she was riding there. And a lot of early day riders got their start of practicing speedway at the speedway track at Saddleback. It was really fantastic. And then if you go up the hill at Saddleback, you have the Mount Wilson right above the mini motorcycle track. And we used to climb Mount Wilson. It was a kind of an easy ride, and we used to like we climbed Mount Wilson. It wasn't that hard, but as 10-year-old kids, it was pretty cool. And then you would turn left at the top of Mount Wilson, and you go all the way to the Matterhorn. Do you remember? Do you remember the Matterhorn? It was fantastic. That was very steep hill. They used to have hill climbing events. And I used to go there as a little kid and just watch and the races. How you doing? We have a visitor here. I need my glasses. I spent a lot of my youth at Saddleback Park riding mini bikes. Yeah, we did too. And Dad made me. He had made everything from scratch. Rest in peace, Mom and Dad. I miss you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for that. Yeah, a lot of us got our start at Saddleback Park. Our parents would take us in the car and drop us off and say, go ahead and ride. And, we'd have a family activity, that was so fantastic. Like what your mom and dad did, they took you to Saddleback and you had that experience. It was just fantastic times at Saddleback. And it was a wonderful park because it was really big and you could park your car, lots of places. You could park your car at the beginning, you could park your car at the motocross track, you could park your car in the back, and you could park the car by the mini motorcycle track, by the speedway track. You could park your car in a lot of places. And lots of people just parked their cars everywhere and they pulled out the motorcycles and just went riding. It was good times. And it's too bad, like I say, that we don't have these kind of places nowadays because Saddleback was just so much fun and it was such a great place. And it was not, like I say, not for just the professional riders. It was for the family, like what you just mentioned. Your mom and dad just take you to Saddleback and make it a family activity. That was so fantastic. And Saddleback was just, really a cool place. That's where I got my first race there. I raced with Randy Mamola. You know Randy Mamola? He was like a road race champion. And I didn't know it until I read my program. And I used to always see the Moran brothers, Kelly and Sean, used to wear those green and white leathers. They had leathers. I was wearing my Levi's and then kind of a Robert M. Law Yamaha motorcycle shop from Anaheim. And then I would see the Moran brothers in these beautiful leathers with those clovers, those green clovers all over their white sleeves. It was just fantastic. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. And there'd be so many great racers there. I always see Jeff Ward there. And he was in that movie, I think, on any Sunday doing the wheelie as a little like 6-year old. That was so cool. And it was just such a fun time. And we'd go to those hill climb events at Saddleback. Do you remember the hill climb at the Matterhorn? It was fantastic. It was very steep. I used to go like, how in the world do these guys climb this? And it was hard. And all day the hill climb events were fun. I climbed halfway up the mountain and watched the racers fall and tumble down the mountain. It was fun. It was good times. And then if you go back further in Saddleback, you got the trials area. You have this remote area, I think, with just rattlesnakes and stuff. And it was fun. You just go down these hills and you're alone, and you would just go down these places that you didn't know where the heck you were leading to. We used to go to the end of that, and then we run into that O'Neill Park, or not O'Neill, it was the park right there. And we used to go to that park right there, and then they have a fence saying, "You're at the end of Saddleback. You can't go any further." And then they had a TT track. Do you remember the TT track? It was way back. They had that way back. You had to drive back, and then they had that TT track. That was kind of fun. And then they had the trials areas. You could go trials riding back there. It was cool. So Saddleback, it was big. Saddleback was big. It was like a city back there. You could just ride everywhere. And it was just a good time for all. And like I say, you could just enjoy it. I had a few experiences at Saddleback. And besides just being a child going to the GP races, and that was fun. I used to come home every day and during the GP races, and then I would have my bicycle, and I lived in Orange at the bottom of Chapman Avenue there by the freeway. And then I would just ride my bicycle by like 50,000 people, and I'd like, goodbye, goodbye. And I'd feel so good because these guys were like stopped in these lines with 50,000 people coming down the mountain, and they were stopped. And I was like riding my bicycle down the hill. I was not going up, I was going down the hill. It was a good time. Well, one time I probably my only one of my memories besides racing at Saddleback. That was fun. My first race, I raced in the minis. I had a 60 mini enduro, and I was kind of scared. Like every time I raced the first time of anything, I get a little nervous. And I think the first turn I crashed. I crashed my first race, and then I got up and I said, "Brian, don't do that again." And I never crashed again there. I crashed because I was nervous, I guess. But I never crashed again. I have a trophy up here, somewhere up here. Let's see if I can find it. It's up here somewhere. There it is. This is my first trophy at Saddleback. I don't know if you can see it or not. It's just a little guy, a little motorcycle in the old days. Look at that guy. Yeah, that was all my name's off of it and everything, and it got worn off. It's an old trophy. That was my first trophy as a mini at Saddleback, and that was cool. I always cherished my first trophy. It wasn't much, but it meant a lot to me. And that's the first motorcycle trophy I ever got. And then I went on to race Speedway for many years, and I had some success there and had some good times. But Saddleback was good. And one experience that I can relate to is uh, I used to be neighborhood friends with Paul Belial. Do you know? Do you know Paul Belial? He was cool. Rest in peace, Paul. He passed away a few years ago, and we love Paul Belial. And his family owned the Belial's restaurant in Garden Grove near Disneyland, and it was one of the great catfish and southern cooking places in the world. And they closed down eventually and sold the land. But Paul had a CZ 125, and it was cool, like a CZ, a 1 2. I was only like 10 or 11 years old, and Paul had this big motorcycle, the 125, and I was still on my mini enduro 60, and I was getting kind of big for it. And I said, Paul, can I ride your 125 because I really would like to ride a big bike. And then Paul's like, yeah, go ahead. Paul's cool, easygoing guy. So I get on his 125 and CZ, and I ride up the Mount Wilson, and I'm like, this is pretty fun. I'm riding the big boys bikes now. I'm off that mini enduro stuff. I'm riding big bikes, and I turn left, and then I go towards the Matterhorn, and I'm riding, and this is fun riding the big bikes. And then all of a sudden, when I get up to the Matterhorn, the CZ died. It just totally died on me. And so I was like, oh my gosh. I'm only 10 or 11 years old. I was like a little guy, I could barely touch the ground on the 125. So my decision making wasn't very good in those days, I must admit. I hope I got a little better now. I hope so. I hope so. And what happened was I had a choice to make of just try to go back and walk up a hill going to the camp. There was a lot of hills going up and down. I'm like, I'm only 10 or 11. I can't walk this bike. It's too big. 125, very heavy. Or I could take the bike down by the Matterhorn, and it's a very steep hill. I'm sure most of you remember that if you've been to Saddleback. And going all the way down, you know, to the canyon there. So I said, I know how to bump start a bike. I think the spark plug was blown, so there's no chance of the bike starting. But I didn't know that. I just knew that if you bump start a bike, the bike would always start, right? I mean, as a little boy. So I'm on the top of this mountain, and I go down the wrong side of the mountain, and I put it in gear, and I bump start the thing, and the thing's going. I was in first gear, and then I go, dang, that's not working. So I put it in second gear, and the thing goes all the way down this kind of steep mountain area. So I'm just like, oh my gosh. And so I went ahead and just kept going down, 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 because it was like all going down at that time. And the bike wouldn't start. I was so smart. I didn't realize the bike was never going to start. Finally, I got to the end of the road. There was no more hills, and I was just in the middle of nowhere. It's getting dark, and then there was like rattlesnakes going by me, and I'm alone. I'm only 10 or 11. I'm getting kind of scared, and then the sun is setting, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I said, I'm going to spend the night here at Saddleback, stuck deep into the canyon, far away from, so there's no people, no riders, no nothing. I was all alone as a little boy. So I'm just sitting there and the sun's setting, it's getting dark. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to spend the night at Saddleback. And then suddenly there was a Jeep come by, and it was the Saddleback Rescue Park. I guess Paul had told the rescue park, Brian, I think it's back there somewhere. Go get him. So they put the broken CZ 125 on the back of this, I guess it was like a Jeep, and I got in the front seat. I never was so happy going back to civilization. I got back to the car where Paul was waiting for many hours, and he's like, "What happened?" And I was mad. I said, "Your stupid CZ 125 stopped working, and it got me stuck deep into the saddlebag." And I was really upset. And Paul and I were kind of bickering over that. We weren't very happy because I was mad, but part of it was my fault because I went ahead and, like kept going down into the wilderness. I got stuck. It was really pretty scary, especially seeing snakes coming by me. I'm like, oh my, how am I going to sleep with snakes around me? So it was crazy. But Saddleback was a great place, great park. and we miss it. And it's just a great experience for everybody. Like I say, the families had a good time, taking their kids, and that's one of the reasons why we don't have a lot of good motorcycle riders developing as much as before, because there's a lack of these parks like Saddleback. And that contributed to a lot of talented riders being developed and exposed to the motorsports. And now there's just not as many tracks available, and there's not as much riding ability, places to go riding, and places to develop. It takes time to develop as a motorcycle rider. You don't just get on a motorcycle and become a champion. It takes time, line upon line, step upon step. Things take time. Rome was not built in a day, and motorcycle riders are not built in 1 second. It takes time. And that's why these parks are so valuable and important for developing riders like Saddleback and Escape Country. And all, I think Carlsbad had a track there, a motocross track. And a lot of these tracks are closing. And a lot of these speedway tracks in Europe are closing because they're building houses and stuff. And that's really causing a dampener on the sports of motorcycles. And there's car racing and stuff, and they're building tracks in the LA Coliseum for NASCAR and stuff, which is cool. But we're gonna have a guest, Ruben Benitez. He was one of my favorite Speedway stars as a child. He's gonna be on the show coming up here soon, and he's a motocross rider. He was a good motocross rider. And he said, I'm a motocross rider, and I hope you talk more about motocross too. And I said to Ruben, we've had Warren Reed on the show, and we like motocross. Motocross is cool. I wish I could have been a motocross rider. And that was just, we're going to have lots of cool riders on the show. We're going to talk about different topics too, not only Speedway, but Saddleback Park today. And enjoyed that Speedway track. Used to see a lot of great early days Speedway stars. And, as a child, that's what gets you motivated into getting into these sports, is watching other racers, being inspired. Guys like Rick Woods and Mike Bass and Danny Becker in the Speedway world, they inspired me, and they inspired a lot of young racers and a lot of fans, and just the exposure is very important. But anyways, thank you so much for hanging out with us today, talking Saddleback Park, the amazing Saddleback Park. It is a great place, and we had a good time, and there was just a lot of people, and thousands of people went there, and I think it closed like in the early '80s. I think maybe they had a few deaths or something like that, lawsuits, and they ended up closing. It's sad. I was there a couple of years ago, and it's just nothing. It's just like a bunch of weeds up there, and I just cry when I see see the place, and then the memories I had, and see how it's just kind of gone to nothing. And it's a sad time when you look at Saddleback Park now. But we hold on to those memories. Indeed, yes, indeed, we hold on to those memories. So thanks so much for hanging out with us today in the Hive. We're gonna have more shows. We're doing live. We're live in the Hive. But thanks so much. Please subscribe if you haven't, and like the show. And we appreciate you. Thank you so much. And we're going to see you. Yeah, we're going to see you next time. Take care.